I think 1 through 10, everybody's good. That means that you better watch your back when Kansas comes to town. I think Lance Leipold's got a team that fundamentally understands that they can be good. And they've had enough of being bad. They've had enough of people not believing them. They've had enough of being run roughshod over. As a matter of fact, I made a point of talking to Earl Bostic Jr., who is left tackle at Kansas. And one of the reasons I want to talk with him is before Leipold got there, he'd given up something like 11 sacks in 11 games. After Leipold got there, he's given up 1 sack in his last 11 games. He has become a fortress. I asked him, what changed, man? He said, Coach talks to me. He asked me about myself. And my offensive line coach asked me about myself. They care to know what I'm like. And that dude has been there for like 6 years. He's seen literally everybody come through. He's seen so much football, and he's seen how bad it can be. And for the first time in his career, he's had a head coach and an offensive line coach that generally just want to get to know him and want to teach him. Hey, man, we're going to slow the game down for you. We're going to make this very simple. Your feet go here. Your hands go here. If you do that, nobody's getting by you. And I love knowing that because I've always been at my best when people slow things down for me and make my job simple. Then I get to execute at a very high level. And that's what Earl's been able to do. So if you could do that with a guy like Earl Bostic Jr., who has every reason to doubt Lance Leipold and his staff after how he had been treated throughout his time at KU, you could be pretty doggone good with guys that are just getting used to, oh, okay, we can go to Austin and we can beat Texas. Cool. We could have Oklahoma on the ropes. And unless Caleb Williams pulls a Houdini act, we win that game. We are the team that knocks off the undefeated Oklahoma Sooners. And Lance is getting it, man. Like, I'm very, very excited to see what Devin Neal looks like. This is a guy that played baseball and football at Kansas, and he's going into his sophomore year. Like, this, he's also very young. He's from Lawrence. He knows what it looks like. He doesn't know what it looks like for Kansas to be great, though. Like, I asked him, like, how old is he? 18, which is ridiculous because that means he's like 5 when Kansas went to the Orange Bowl, right? And was, I think, peaked at like number 3 in the country in the Associated Press poll. K-State is going to be good. Deuce Vaughn, who I tried to tell y'all about, who we all tried to tell y'all about, is the only returning first-team All-American in this entire league. And he made it as an all-purpose player. I teased Chris Kleiman because last year he told me, yeah, we're going to try to ease Deuce into the offense. And then he gave him the ball 235 times on the ground to say nothing how many times he gave it to him in the air. He's like, yeah, I fooled you, didn't I? Look, they have an opportunity here to be pretty great. They got Adrian Martinez going in, who is as polished quarterback from a media standpoint that I've ever seen. Handled everything just fine, participated in the interview, wanted to discuss himself and Kansas State, wanted to represent Kansas State in the right way, to use coaching parlance, which is to say with respect, with reverence to Nebraska, and with an understanding that, yeah, Kansas State has an expectation of not just beating Oklahoma, which they can do, winning the Big 12 championship. It's also Colin Klein's first year as an offensive coordinator, which means that he tapped Adrian Martinez for his opportunity to show everybody what he can do as a play caller. And Kleiman went out of his way to say, look, I told him that this is an opportunity for you when they played LSU in the bowl game last year. But he also said after they won that game, hey, man, that job was always yours. I just wanted to see. I just want to see what you would do with that. And you did it in a way that I can respect. He didn't become overbearing. He didn't choose to tell everybody this is his job. He just went out there and called a great football game. And Deuce went off, right? Now you got all of that coming back. You got guys that understand what it means to play K-State football. And I think they're going to surprise some people. And it's also at the top that Baylor, defending champ, they're going to have a new starting quarterback. We'll see what Blake Shapen can do, right? They're also going to turn over on the defense, which means that guys like Dylan Doyle and Bryson Jackson are going to have to step up in a very real way. Like losing Jalen Petrie off that team is a very big deal. But you added guys like Jackson Player, who I think was the second best player on that 2020 Tulsa team where Zaven Collins won Defensive Player of the Year, right? Like he's that good. And then you have Dave Aranda, who knows just what it means to be vulnerable to his players. Matter of fact, kept thinking about when Steve Sarkisian is talking about being vulnerable, that this is what Dave Aranda does. Because he told me, look, all you can do is be yourself and be authentic and try to do it consistently every day, because you're going to have kids that look back at you and say, I don't believe a word you're saying. I've seen people come through, they leave me or they let me down. And your job as the head coach is to be that same dude no matter what goes down. If you're a mean cuss, be the same mean cuss with everybody you meet. If you're going to be the philosopher football coach, be the philosopher football coach. I really love talking with Dave Aranda because I learn more about him than I do about his defense every single time. I also think that Oklahoma State's got an opportunity here, but they're going to have to figure it out real quick with Derek Mason. If that defense is anything like it was last year and Spencer Sanders can actually hold on to the football and not give it away, yeah, they could be staring at their first opportunity to be invited to the college football playoff in their history. Could be very cool. Like, as Granny Clump once said, you'll walk over in the Big 12, but you'll limp back. Okay? Nobody in here is going to give it to you. It's not going to be easy in this league for the first time in a very long time, quite honestly. I mean, we would look at Kansas and be like, okay, that's a W. Or we would look at K-State in flux and say, okay, that's a W. Or Baylor in flux and say, that's a W. You can't do that this year, at least in the preseason. I'm very excited about that. I want to see more parity in college football. I'm not one of the guys that just wants to see everybody end up with Alabama and Ohio State, even if that's what we're going to end up with. I would like to see competitive football played. Okay, from that, I want to talk a little bit about name, image, and likeness and how this is playing out in real time. So laying this out, this time last year, the Supreme Court had just ruled in Alston v. NCAA that you couldn't limit the kind of extracurricular benefits that an athlete could get. And then we had the NCAA say, cool, we're going to allow name, image, and likeness to be monetized. So what does that mean? So we'll start with the Big 12 and work to the SEC as SEC media days are over at the time that you're seeing this, but some news came out. Texas Tech plans to invest $200 million into its stadium and facilities. That's one. It's a lot of money, and that's a huge investment in we want to be great. We see an opportunity with Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC to where perhaps we can slide to the top of this conference with Central Florida, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati joining up in 2024. So, on top of that, we also have the Boosters, the Matador Club, at Texas Tech pledging $25,000 a year NIL contracts to all 100 of their Texas Tech players, or the top 100, which goes beyond your 85 scholarships. So basically, 85 scholarship players and like the 15 best walk-ons. That's not a small amount of money to anybody, right? I do think it's a small amount of money when we're talking about head coaches making 7 figures and we're talking about position coaches making 6 figures. I choose to say, what can you do with 25 grand? Well, I mean, you get a good down payment on a house if you got good credit, but that's 2019 numbers. What does that look like in 2022? The housing market is not the same, right? You could also buy a really nice car, a really nice new car, but then the money's gone, right? Now that's also 100 grand over 4 years. If you're smart about how you invest it, if you went to school and you understand the value of compound interest, throw that money into a really good mutual fund or throw that money into a really good CD and come out with even more money and your college degree and no debt. It's a very cool thing to happen. But it also goes back to this idea of booster consortiums, because the way that name, image, and likeness has worked, the people benefiting and the people that most want to talk about this are boosters, some of whom are fans, some of whom just want to be buddy-buddy with players and coaches, and players themselves who are getting to make a little bit of money for the first time in the history of really this sport on the level. The people that don't like it so much are coaches. And that's where I get really interested in what's going on here. Joey McGuire, I think, is going to be an outstanding coach at Texas Tech. He's already a legend in the state of Texas. If you don't know much about Coach McGuire in Cedar Hill, it's a quick Google away, and you'll come to understand why this man is in the Hall of Fame for the Texas High School Football Coaches Association. He is revered by players. He is revered by coaches. And like Jeff Traylor at UTSA, he has staked his reputation on hiring other guys from Texas. He got Zach Kitley away from Western Kentucky to Texas Tech. All Zach Kitley did was put up the most prolific offense in the country last year and watch as his quarterbacks and wide receivers set records. They're hoping to do that at Texas Tech. They got a 3-horse race for quarterback. I'm going to go ahead and just tap Donovan Smith because I think that's going to be the guy. but Baron Morton is pretty doggone good, and so is Tyler Shuck. All he did was lead Oregon to a conference championship game in 2020.
Thanks for watching this video, and remember, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos on the #1 Ranked Show YouTube channel.